Hi, folks. This is Sean McLean. Throwing in a couple tips or tricks, a little something I tend to add for students that have maybe seen me go through stuff in class, or maybe people who are just picking up a little bit of extra in the ServiceNow platform or system. What I want to talk about today is just a trick I do as a developer to add a little bit of pop to something I want to show people. Oftentimes, when we think about workshops, people ask as a requirement, hey, I want this special field added, or I want this extra thing visible. And so, what I like to do is to call attention to that. And so, we're going to do a quick example of how I might take out a new field that I built in the system and kind of make it show up a little more clearly. So we're going to go to the simplest case I can find, which is an open incident record. So I'll go into open an incidents, and then I'll just click on any old record is fine. And we assume that we have another field out there that shows. And in this case, I built an example in which the field is kind of showing from an update set. But I'm going to kind of walk through how and why I might do that. So I'll go into configure and form layout. We could use form design, either works just fine. And what I'll be doing is first adding the field, because we all know how to do that. We learned that in fundamentals, right? But what I want to do is go a step further and say, hey, there's a cool little tip I can do with a client script that will make that field show for the customer or the constituents of the company that I'm an administrator for, so that the little field will show and go, oh, this is the field that you asked for. This is the field that you added. So I'll go in here and I'll say this is my very special field, right? And I'll get rid of this one just so that we kind of get this idea. So this is the my very special field. It's string data. I'll add it. One of the things I like to do, particularly with these kind of things, in demos and workshops, I want them to be visible, and I want the people who asked, the people who drove the requirement, to really see where it lives. So I'll put it up in usually the upper right corner is a quick way to draw attention to it. So that's super nice, right? It draws attention to the field. And you can see here's my very special field. But really, it's the same color. They all look the same. And again, I do want to emphasize this is not something I would really do in production. And in fact, I get nervous about that aspect, because when people see that, then their next requirement is, well, we want all the fields all different colors. And that becomes a performance issue. But for demonstrating something, it's very handy to do something to make this field show. So 3 cool little things that you can do here. One of them, if I right-click the field, I have something called styles. So if I go into configure styles, I can create a new style. Now styles is just a record in a table, and styles in this case responds to CSS, or cascading style sheets. It's something you learn if you do any web development. Never fear though, because you may be going, oh, this is one of those scripty things. I don't understand how this works. I'm never going to figure it out. It's not that hard. The value would be the value that would be inside the field, right? But the style is simply a list that you can look up on any web page. I could just go out to Google and look up backgrounds colors or background scripts. In this case, I'm going to use background or just CSS. Background dash color, right? So anybody can type that, right? And then colon. And if I knew my web safe color codes, I would add that. In this case, I'll do blue. Because the basic colors can kind of be picked up. And if I were to add this little bit of information and click submit, I get a little blue dot. That's how I know that it's working. Now if I go back one more, I can look on my form and hey, the inside of the field is blue. Now again, I could adjust the values to kind of play with if it's this value, turn it blue. If it's that value, turn it red. But styles is a really handy little thing that I think not everybody knows about. Now let's take this the next step though. What if I wanted this part, the label, to be different, or to put a message underneath that says specifically when this was added? And this tends to be what I do if I'm demoing fields that we've had from, like I said, a workshop or requirement. For that, I'm going to actually add a client script. And if I go to client scripts and I click on new, and again, client script sounds intimidating. I'm just going to call this new field demo. But they're not really all that intimidating, even if whether you know JavaScript or not. I'll call this new field demo. I'll explain this Now, there are a lot of ways we could get more fancy with this, and obviously one of the things, as I keep saying, I'd only do it in development. I might also want to make sure that when I'm done, I mark it inactive before it goes to production. There's a lot of other things I could do, but the very simplest is just this. I'll make it an onload client script, which puts in this little bit of code here. And if I happen to know the name of that field, then I can easily use a tool that we call gform or glide form. Gform is a series. It's what we refer to in JavaScript as an object, and it has a lot of little methods or functions, tool sets that you can apply with them. And it'll actually help me figure out what those are. If I go to gform dot, and here's some of the things that I can do. Now, it's cool that I know that there's decorations, so I could put a little marker right next to it. But maybe probably more appropriate for me, in my example, is Flash. Flash will make the field blink in a certain color if I know what the field name is. And it tells you that as well. There are two parameters to put in here. One is the actual field name, right? And the other is the color that we want it to be. So we'll go with red. It'll be kind of like Christmas. Now, there's a third parameter as well, and that would be how many times it blinks. But if I want it to be solid, I'll just leave it like that. The other method that I'll use is gform dot. And if I just start typing show field message, that looks pretty close to what I want. And if I'm not as sure about it, I might do something like this just to look it up. There we go. Show. And that's show error box. Here's show field message. Displays an informational or error message. If I want to find more about this, I can look this up in developer.servicenow.com to see more specifics. But this gives me a pretty good recipe for what it is I'm trying to accomplish. And again, I'll do field name, right? Whatever that name of that field is. So I'll have to go back in. And what I do in my systems is I'll put the requirement that drove this. And I tend to put the dot, dot, dot because so many other characters that we see are actually characters in code, right? Colon means something for JSON, and semicolon means something for JavaScript, and dash is math for minus. So putting the ellipses like that just kind of gives me a hint that it's not code that's being written there, it's just comments. So then I'll come out here to whatever the field name is, and stories, so story requirements. Or maybe requirement numbers, or whatever that documentation is. I'll put that information there. Of course, as always, we want to try to clean things up, so before I'm done this, I'll line it up like that, and then I'll submit it. Now, we know that this isn't going to show on my system, right, because I don't remember the field names. I made a kind of silly mistake in the beginning. When I looked at that field, right, I didn't get its name. So to get the name, I can simply right-click and say Show, and there's the full field name, you, my very special field. So now I can edit that little script. And to do that, I can go to Configure and Client Scripts. Now the cool thing about going this way, if you click the context menu and come down to Configure and Client Scripts, the system will filter so that it only shows me, instead of seeing all client scripts, it only shows me the client scripts that are used on the incident or its parent table, which is task. So that kind of narrows me down a little. I can further narrow down by searching by updated, and there's my new field demo. And then what I can do is I can just change the field name with this information. And we'll do a quick update. We'll take a look. I can go to recents to get to that record. right? Recents active equals true. There's my record. And hey, look, there's my very special field. There's the notes about it. So 3 different tips, 3 different ways to make a field stand out. The reason I would do this would be to show a field that customers or constituents have asked for through a story or a requirement in a dev instance. So then in a workshop, we can easily call attention to those things when we're demoing kind of what's gotten done and why and how. So we can kind of call attention to those fields. So those 3 ways include: 1, right-click and choose Style. In using Style, you would use CSS, and you would use background dash color colon, and then whatever color semicolon at the end. 2, configure client scripts. Within those client scripts, there's method 2 and method 3. In the client scripts, gform.flash, and then there are just 2 parameters. 1, the name of the field, and 2, the color you want it to be. Now I did red. Probably more efficient or cool is if I go and look up the ServiceNow color scheme or my company's color scheme, and use the web-safe color code, right? So # and then the number. The other piece to put in there on the field is gform.showFieldMessage, which again can go under the specific field, and then a little explanation. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully these are some tricks you can use, or tips that you can make your world a little more efficient in. This is Sean McLean with a quick tip. More later for students who kind of want to review these or take a look at them.